guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Airbnb Nomads podcast. And on this week's Property Education Masterclass, we are joined by the incredible Robert McPhun. Now, Robert is a personal friend of mine. He's also a best-selling author, mentor, and coach in the incredible subject of communication. Now, guys, this topic is massive. It is everything. It's the foundation of your business, of your relationships with family, with your partner. It's everything. Without this, you cannot succeed in business, relationships, in life. You need to know this stuff. Stick around till the end. There is so much amazing information and so many nuggets in here. We could have spoke for hours, but we had to end it somewhere. So enjoy this one. You're going to get tons of value. And on that note, guys, if you are inspired by this podcast, if you do get value, if this does help you grow in your business, in your life, I would ask you to please go and follow the show. Also, leave a review. It helps us more than I can tell you, and it allows us to continue giving huge amounts of value and content to our community and helping everybody to become their best selves. So on that note, settle in, grab a cup of tea. This is a fantastic episode. Here we go. Robert, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for coming on.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks for thinking of me and inviting me. Thank you.
Absolutely, mate. I think this is going to be a really cool episode because I think what you do, and we're going to obviously get deep into what it is that you do, but I know roughly what your business is about and your expertise and your knowledge is all around conversation. And conversation, communication, how to talk to people in all aspects of life, whether it's in our relationships, whether it's in a work setting, whether it's in a property situation, right, where we're talking to investors, is absolutely everything. It's something that, without blowing my own trumpet, it's something that I'm somewhat, I would say, a little bit more confident than most in holding a conversation with a stranger or with a group of people. But I do know that so many people struggle with it. And I think in this day and age, with social media, with technology, with phones, I think people are actually losing the ability to look someone in the eyes and have a real in-depth conversation, right? And I'd love you to correct me if you think I'm wrong on that. But so I'm really pleased to have you on the show. I think our listeners are going to get a ton of value out of this. So why don't we start, Robert? I'm interested to know a little bit about your background and what was it that kind of led to where you are today, which is this communications kind of expert. Where did it all start?
I suppose it started in many respects when I was about 16 years of age, and I'm a lot older than that now, you probably guessed. But I started at 16 years of age in the police. So I joined the police, and from a very early start in my career, I realised that it basically, if I wanted to get out of very tense and difficult situations, that I had to have the ability to speak and the ability to communicate, the ability to weigh people up very, very, very quickly, and then say the right thing in response to their body language, their tone, or their language. And I did about 20 years on the streets. I'll concertina it very, very quickly so we can actually get to the meat of the podcast. But so I did about 20 years on the streets, and then I wanted to go into training. I wanted to pass on the skill set that I had onto other officers. And so after about 20 years, I went into training, and I specialized in training young officers in how to communicate and their behaviors and their attitudes, and the fact that their behaviors and attitudes could actually affect the way they communicated. And one stage I was teaching police interviewing techniques for about 3 years. So that really helps you to understand that not everybody wants to give you information, a bit like vendors really, and a bit like estate agents. So, it sometimes feels like you're dragging the information out of them. Well, obviously it's the same with not only suspects who don't really want to speak to you when they're in an interview situation, but also sometimes even witnesses and victims don't want to tell you the full story. So I passed the knowledge that I had on to other officers, and during the course of being in the police, I modified, if you like, the police interview model that we had into the model that I now use for having difficult conversations in the workplace, when I was having difficult conversations in the workplace as a senior manager. And then when I left the job, um, I think you know more than anybody, Alex, that really any business is a people business. It's about how you communicate with
100%.
individuals, how you come across, how you read those people. Um, and when I got into property, I realized that I had a lot of transferable skills. I was at a training session this weekend, and they were ostensibly new people to property. And I said, the first thing you've got to do is disavow yourself of the opinion that you're very new in property. The reality, you've got a lot of life skills that are transferable into the property sector. And so in the end, about 4 years ago, I think it is, I wrote a book based around my communication model to help people. And I've got to
Perfecting
confess,
property conversations.
perfecting property conversations. And I must confess, and I think it's
I've got it.
important.
I've
Yeah,
read it.
absolutely. Thank you very much. And I class it as a very like a bit of a reference book. It's not one of those books that you'd read, page to page, etc. It's got some really great tips in it. It's got over 100 tips in it on planning and preparing. And I'm sure we'll go into that a bit as we
Yeah.
go through this conversation. But
Yeah, I want to get a bit deeper into that book, Robert, and I definitely want to get deep into property specific
yeah,
conversations,
yeah,
because, like you said, you touched on it, so important, and we talk about it a lot with our mentees, right? Property is a people's business. All business is a people's business, but property even more so, because someone wants to do a deal with you because of you, because of the
mm,
way that you talk, the way that you communicate, building trust, building relationships, building rapport, finding common ground. And there's so much to it. And that's where, and we'll talk about this, but just while it comes to mind, when people are calling agents, right? We always say to our mentees and to anyone that I'm going to give an advice to, when you call up about a specific deal, when they answer the phone, before you say, "Oh, hi, is 123 Smith Street still available?" say anything other than that first, right? For the first couple of minutes, talk about the weather, talk about, where their office is situated. Anything other than the immediate deal. Build some common ground, find some rapport, try and crack a joke, and then get into the meat of it, right? But anyway, we'll get into that. Robert, I want to talk a little bit about the police,
yeah, yeah.
because I'll be honest, right? I feel a bit sorry for the police these days in the UK. Something else that we'll talk about is our love for travel. I think we both spend a lot of time outside of the UK. I'd love to talk about that because I think that's a common interest that we have. But police these days, I've never been in the police. I wouldn't want to be in the police. I think they're incredible. The job that they do, I think it's one of the hardest jobs of any job in the UK today, is being in the police, because it seems to me that whatever they say, they're wrong, right? If something doesn't go to plan, it's their fault. And then if they don't take action and another outcome happens, again, that's their fault. Everything they said. So have you seen things change with the police, like from when you were in the police? Was it easier then to be able to just go out and do your job and stop criminals without getting hauled in front of a judge because you said the wrong word, touched them the wrong way? You know what I mean? Is it
Massive, no,
harder these
massively.
days for
Yeah,
police
absolutely,
officers?
massively. There wasn't the TikTok, there wasn't the reels and things like that where people
Right.
immediately start,
Recorded
and
everything.
it's so easy to take things out of context. It's so easy to take a little tiny snippet of a 2, 3, 4, even 15-minute conversation, and the one little
Mm.
tiny snippet, and that's why politicians speak in sound bites, because they know it can be taken out of context. So absolutely, because one of the things about communication is you want to speak in the language that the other person understands. So, as we used to say in very generic terms, and I don't wish to stereotype people, but the reality is there's no point in me walking up to a professional or a solicitor and saying, "Now then, mate, you all right? How's things going?" You know, as opposed to somebody, and there's no point in going up to somebody, on the streets and going, "Good afternoon, sir. How are you? How are you out for a perambulation today?" you have to communicate at the level of that
You
individual,
got to speak their
and that,
language.
yeah, and if that meant a bit of a swear word or a, you know, you you immediately started to communicate at their level, and if that was videoed, I'd have to hold my hand up. I've got to be very careful here. I don't want cough. I don't want to admit to anything that's illegal or anything like that. But the truth is, I spoke to people at the level that I thought I would get my message across, and I think that's really important. That it's incumbent on you as the person who's giving the message, it's incumbent on you to make sure it's getting received, and so it's in the same language or it's at the same level as and to a degree, um, giving the person what they want in terms of their agenda, which you're absolutely right. So speaking to estate agents, it would be, I want to build a relationship. I'm and I'm sure you teach your mentees this. What we're actually after is having a relationship with an estate agent. So actually, they're ringing you. That's what we're aiming for.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's not
Getting in
just
that
about
little
ring.
black book.
Yeah, and it can be quicker than you think if you're on. And so everything we talk about in this podcast, Alex, and I think we have spoke on the phone before, and thanks for remembering those occasions. I think you would hopefully agree that everything's about being authentic. It's about being yourself.
Mm.
It's not about being manipulative or about sort of trying to play the smart person. I always say to my mentees and coaches, really, it's about being yourself. It's about speaking the same language. So, yeah, it's massively changed. And I was talking to somebody about it at the weekend, and I said, obviously, I would change, but
So, so you think if you was doing that job today,
yeah,
you'd be speaking a different language. You'd be advising the officers to speak a different way and act a different way, and
I, I'd, I'd
to
be,
almost protect themselves from the potential. And you're right; it's not something that I mean, obviously, I'm aware of it, but you really made that stand out. And I think it's disgusting and so sad these days when you see an incident take place, like a serious attack or something like that, and there'll be one or two good-hearted citizens that are dealing with it and trying to help the person, and then there's 50 other people with their cameras out,
yeah,
with their phones out, filming it to upload to social media, and then the police officers or the ambulance or whoever it is that attends the professionals, they get caught up in that. So everything that they're doing, they know that they're being filmed. That must be a
I
very
would.
scary place.
Yeah, it is a scary place, and I I hate to say it, but I think you've hit the nail on the head. If I was training the officers now, I'd be saying we've got to start with the outcome in mind, and the outcome in mind might be that you're before a Crown Court judge, or you're before a magistrate,
Yeah.
or you're before even a tribunal or a public inquiry, which is God forbid, a public
Mm.
inquiry, where you are having to justify your actions, your behaviour, and your language. And therefore,
Mm.
if you've got cameras, you are going to have to be very careful about what you say. Now, obviously, what then that does is constrain how you might deal with it if those cameras went
Of
on,
course.
and if and I'm not saying and I think we're both agreeing here. It's not that the officers would be doing anything illegal or doing anything underhand. It's just they would be communicating in a way that might not look, like it's out of context. 2 3 months, even 2 or 3 years later. I mean, the worst case scenario for me, I was in Crown Court 6 years after a job, you know, and having to relay to the Crown Court my actions and language 6 years after the event, you know.
Mm.
Um, so yeah,
Couple of things on that, Robert, is that, and without kind of going off piece here and getting sidetracked, but it does kind of grate on me a little bit these days how everything's filmed and you know, everybody's complaining and moaning, and when an officer makes a decision, in a split second, and then that footage is recorded, and then that officer might potentially end up in front of a judge and being cross-examined, and everybody's got their opinion, right? You read the story in the papers. I would love to take those people that are there, on their high horse, saying, well, I would have done this and I would have done that, and how dare he did this, and say, here we go. I'm going to put you in the exact same position. You've got 2 seconds to make a decision whether to, you know, pull out the taser or not. And I want to see what you do. Because if the officer does it, he gets, you know, it looks bad. If he doesn't do it and then that person turns around and hurts someone else, guess who also looks bad. So it's a complete lose-lose situation. And, you know,
Yeah,
you hear these things every day and it's sad.
yeah,
Because it
and I think
stops them doing their job, like you said. It stops them, you know, protecting us like they want to.
yeah, and I think people
For
are
fear.
frightened of getting. Yeah, I think you're right. I think in the NHS, paramedics, the fire service, the police, a lot of professions now and large organisations are more concerned about not getting sued, about not being seen in a bad light, than they are about actually producing a service or producing a product. And so. I mean, you mentioned the taser. Obviously, they only came in towards the back end of my career. I actually started in the police before you were born. I think, and you know, so all I had was
I'm not
which is
that
what
young. I don't know about that.
yeah,
Not that young
you
anymore.
certainly look at it. But I joined in 1974, so I just had a wooden truncheon, you know, so there was no
Yeah, it's
taser, there
before
was
I was
no
born.
gas, you know, and yeah, and so we had to talk, we had to, you know, because you know, if somebody was bigger than us, you would end up on the wrong end of a you know a beating sort of thing. So that's where you learn to talk and you learn to adapt. But yeah, it's very easy, as you say, when somebody's got you know months to unpick a file and go and present a case in
Yeah,
court to criticise somebody who had to make a decision at 3 o'clock in the morning when the weather's appalling, when you've got no resources
exactly.
to make a decision. So yeah.
It's a very tough job. So yeah, let's not get stuck in the weeds on the police force. It's my fault because I feel quite passionately about it, and I hear about the stories every day, and I feel bad for them because guess what? The people that are at home saying, "Oh, what a bastard," and how could he have done this? And guess who they're picking up the phone to first when the shit hits the fan in their house? You
Yeah,
know, so it's
100%.
like, you know, anyway. So, all right. So let's close the door on the police chapter.
Yeah.
Um, After that, you moved into the corporate world, was it?
No, this will blow your mind. I actually became a clinical hypnotherapist for 2 or 3 years because I was fascinated
That's
by
right.
people's
You did tell me
behaviour.
about, yeah.
Yeah, I was fascinated by people's
Right.
behaviour and the way we behave, and so I actually became a clinical hypnotherapist. I was hoping to help people with self-esteem and self-confidence issues, um, and mindset, which still applies to actually property. And your mentees, I'm sure, will lack
Of course.
confidence in certain areas. You know, they understand what to do. It's just there's something holding them back, their limiting beliefs. All of those things fascinated me. So I went into hypnotherapy, and in the end, I ended up helping lots of people with weight loss. And it didn't float my boat the way I thought it would float my boat, because I
Was it
think
specifically weight loss? Was
it's
that
where the
the
money was.
specific field? Or?
Yeah, if I'm being honest, it's well, I ended up. We could really digress, Alex, here because I actually trained, yeah, in the virtual gastric band. So I used to hypnotize people, put them under, and make them believe that they'd been through an operation to have a gastric band fitted, and then when they
No way.
came, yeah, and then when they came out of it, they therefore ate significantly less than they did before, 3 or 4 mouthfuls of food, and psychologically they would feel full. Um, and I had
That
great
is
success at it.
crazy.
Yeah, great success at it. Trained by one of the best people in the world who lives in Beverly, believe it or
If
not.
I paid you a handsome fee, could you hypnotize me to feel stronger on my bike when I'm hanging out my ass in the mountains here in Mallorca?
Uh,
Because that would be, I'd
Absolutely.
pay a lot of money for
Yeah,
that.
yeah. I had somebody who came to me because he was going to be running a marathon. So I did some recordings for him for his training sessions. Yeah, because you know better than anybody, Alex. It's about mindset. It's about you know whether you believe you can or you believe you can't. You're right. You know Henry Ford. These are old
Mm.
cliches. I know they are, but they're old and they stand the test of time because there's
That's
an element of truth in them. You know.
that is a good saying, and that is one that does stand out because it is so true.
Yeah.
It is so true. You know, if you don't feel in any situation that you should be there or that you've got the knowledge or the confidence to pull off whatever it is that you're attempting to do, that's gonna that's going to come off of you, right? You're going to
You're
put
going to
off
leak
those
it.
vibes. You're going
Yeah,
to leak it, and then they're going to pick that up, whoever it is that you're in the conversation with. And that, people aren't stupid. They know the way that you're coming across, the things that you're saying, the way that you're standing, the way that you're holding yourself, where you're looking. It's
yeah,
all psychological, right? it,
yeah.
it, it
And people will think, when we're listening to this, who are in property, what's this got to do with me? Well, if you want to be a property investor, you've got to start, act, and think like a property investor. And I'm not
mm,
saying, again, don't be authentic, don't make things up and try and gild a lily and say, oh, I've already got 5 deals behind me, when you haven't. I seriously think you need to be authentic. But unless you start thinking and acting like the person you want to become, then you are really putting challenges and barriers
mm.
in the way. So for me, I went into estate agents when I first started. So I finished hypnotherapy, and my partner Nicola was still in the police. And we've talked about Nicola in the past because she loves mountain biking, and in fact, and she loves biking, and she's she came fourth today in her age group in a duathlon up in Edinburgh. She's trying to
I saw
qualify
that
for.
saw that on your Facebook. Yeah,
Yeah,
awesome.
she's trying to qualify. Well, she's already qualified for this year's European Championships. She's trying to qualify for next year's European Championships in her age group. And again, all of that has been about belief. She didn't think she belonged, and so we've worked on that for the last couple of years, and she now represents Great Britain in her age group in multi sports, duathlon,
That's amazing.
aquabike, and triathlon. Um, all through property, actually. We couldn't have done that if I hadn't got on the property journey. But so my property journey started 10 years ago when Nicola was still in the police, and we wanted to get her out of the police because she was starting to suffer with her health. And so we went with a national provider of education. Um, we completed that person's course, we were successful, and then I became a coach and a mentor in property. But when I first started going into estate agents, there was an element in me that thought, oh, I'm not really into property, I'm not really that conversant with how property works, etc. And so I went in and said that. I went and said, look, I'm learning. I want to learn about property, but I'm serious and I'm genuine, and I do have some funds available, which is very helpful. But I've got funds available. I'd really like to get involved in property to supplement my pension, and I put it back on them by saying, and hopefully you can help me. Because people
So
genuinely,
Robert, can you tell us a little bit about obviously this podcast is, we do serviced accommodation. That's
yeah,
what we do. That's how we earn our money. That's our business. That's what we teach and mentor in specifically. We've also got the portfolio of buy to lets. What was it that what road did you decide to go down in your own specific property journey? Because I think people would be interested to know, because a lot of people, this is the great thing about property, right? You can be in a completely unconnected career, know nothing about property, and once you start researching and educating yourself in all the different strategies, you could all of a sudden you bust this myth that everybody thinks that you need hundreds of thousands of pounds to get started. There's
yeah.
all different creative ways. There's, private investor finance, there's options, there's all kinds of stuff. So how did you get started? I know you had a few quid in the bank, but what was your chosen strategy?
Um, I didn't choose a strategy per se, and I don't want this to sound facetious or tongue in cheek. I genuinely believe that if you create great leads, then you can turn those leads and convert them into great properties. So I didn't specifically set out to do HMOs or flats or buy to. I just thought, do you know what? I'm going to use my skill set, which is networking. So I networked with estate agents and letting agents. I networked with deal sources, but it was important that I had the knowledge to understand what they were telling me, whether a deal stacked up or it didn't, and so I could look at it further. So I'm going to sit here and be honest with you and say, look, I was easy. It was easier as well for me because I was in the north, so I had a bit of money. I was in the north. I'm good at networking. I'm good at talking to people. So actually, I built up a portfolio of buy-to-lets, HMOs, and blocks of flats. You know the classic blocks of flats in that are being converted by somebody, large 3-story Victorian building converted into 3 or 4
Yep.
flats. So I hold the whole freehold on all the flats, not blocks of flats where there were separate titles, etc. And I, generally speaking, bought them through either exchange delayed, if I didn't have the money, exchange contracts, delayed completions,
Mm-hmm.
and I have done purchase lease options as well for those. I'm sure people will look up what those are. I've got to hold my hands up and say I've not done rent to rents. Not because I didn't want to, it's just I've never had a deal come to me that stacked up as a rent to rent
Yep.
where it wasn't hands on. Because I definitely at my age didn't want to be completely hands on with my portfolio.
Yeah.
So
You didn't want to create
that
another job.
100%, 100%, which a lot of people do, as you know, in the
Of
end.
course.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
So that's
so
what,
when you
yeah. So
when you
that's what we
started
did.
your property journey, Robert, along with Nicola, I know you had this. The main driver was to get Nicola out of the job, right?
Yeah,
So you could spend more time together. She was getting a bit burnt out with the police, understandable. At that time, did you have a really, because this is something, when a mentee joins our program, we have a kickoff call, right? And
yeah,
the
absolutely.
first thing we do is sit down and we say, before we talk about analysis, numbers, any of that, why are you doing this? Where are you trying to get to? And we really spend a big chunk of time focusing in laser clear on the why, right? Where are you trying to get to? So did you have that? Did you know that you wanted to use property not only to get Nicola out of the job, but also so you could spend time abroad? Was that a burning desire at that point?
Uh, I think I've got to be honest. The main desire was getting Nicola out of the job. So, I'm always happy to admit, you know, where I'm always happy to disclose where I've struggled with things as well. I'm not one of those who look, oh, look at me, the great I am. I've done this, I've done that. It's like, no, I've had my challenges as well. And one of my challenges was I didn't actually believe that we could live the lifestyle that we've got from property. So we just set modest targets, and they were doable, obviously. And we set a modest target of Nicola leaving the police in 2 years with us replacing her wages. And the reality was we actually achieved it in 8 months. Now, if you'd have told me
Wow.
that, yeah, if you'd have told me that, I've got to be honest, I wouldn't have believed you. And I didn't believe the people who were telling me that. And I think that was one of the hurdles that I have now, is saying to people, yeah, you can do that. You can do that. And, we can show you how. And because as you say, you're absolutely right. That's not what you hear. That's not what you read in the papers. It's negative this, it's negative that.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to describe to people. Yeah, again, not digressing onto the police, but a very negative atmosphere, very negative, you know,
Yeah.
sort of environment. And when I first started moving into property environments, the right property environments, I actually found them quite weird, because it's like, these people are helpful. These people want you to succeed, and
Everybody's got a dream and they're all on the same path trying to get
yeah,
there with a
yeah,
positive out mindset. Yeah.
yeah, I've got to accept, admit, it was slightly alien to me, but I opened my eyes to it. I embraced it. I'm still a bit cynical. I still come across a bit cynical. I like to think I'm actually realistic. I'm not one of these get rich quick, you know, trainers and things like that. It is very much, look, these are the challenges, particularly in the
Yeah.
current climate, with
You're going to
high
have to grind
interest
for a little bit.
rates. Yeah. And so, yeah, that the massive reason why was Nicola leaving the police. Once we achieved that, the reason why then became, yeah, just enhancing our lifestyle, traveling the world, doing events, and our house in South Africa, which we've now got. So our intention is to, live in South Africa, watching whales and dolphins. And you've seen my Facebook
Oh,
posts.
don't. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, my
Yeah.
Facebook posts aren't cheesy ones with keys. They are, this is what I'm doing. Because
Real life. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So
I tell you what, Robert, something that kind of springs to mind based on what you was just talking about, which is this whole negative mindset. And I think it is, without banging on about the UK too much and the way I see and feel about it. The UK's got some good things about it, but I think on a whole, the stuff that is rammed down your throat every day through the media, whether it's the news on the TV or the newspapers, it's all doom and gloom. It's all cost of living, inflation, the weather. It's all very down, and this was really highlighted to me massively about 2 weeks ago. I put a video on TikTok. It was a snippet from a podcast, and it was just a 45-second clip, right? And it was me basically talking about something which I'm very passionate about, which is this way that we're all programmed to live, which is, you spend the best years of your life, your prime years, your healthiest years, where you've got it all going for you, right? Where you can enjoy the world, you can travel, you can have experiences. For most of us, because of the way that life script is kind of written and handed to us from the minute we can start consuming information, we spend the best years of our life working our nuts off in a job, which for most of us, we don't enjoy. We're just making money to keep the lights on. Unfortunately, for most people, that's the way it is. And in reality, what we need to do is find a way of earning money where we can remove ourselves from the need of physically having to be there in exchange for time for money, right? The time for money exchange trap. And we need to build a business that's systemized, automated, as passive as it can be, so we can spend the best years of our life traveling the world and having fun, right? Because relying on doing that when or if we get to 65, 70, right? If we get there and we can retire, chances are we're going to have so many ailments that we can't really enjoy the fruits of our labor, right? So it was just a little thing. It was just a little bit about that. And
I,
this video blew up. It went viral. I think we're on about 800,000 views now, thousands of comments. And yes, there was a nice chunk of them that were like, oh, that's, completely understand. I agree. We've got to find a way. I'm not happy. I want out my job. I want more. I deserve more. I want to spend more time with friends, family, community, experiences, memories. I want to travel. That was great. But unfortunately, about 80% of the comments on this TikTok was all this, oh, it's okay for you. I've got kids. I've got a mortgage. I've got debt. This is it. Life is life. We deal with the hand we've been dealt. And it was like, wow, these people are in a really bad place. They're unhappy every day, living their life, doing their job, coming home, but that was it for them. They weren't willing to entertain any other possible way or any other possible life that was out there for them. They were stuck on that path. That was it. This is life. Life sucks. And you are another example, like everybody else that comes on this podcast, of saying, no, there's another way. I want to get Nicola out of her job. And within 8 months, you've done it. And you've completely changed the course and direction of your lives. So
it's
would you
yeah,
agree that most people with 2 arms, 2 legs, a brain that works, has the opportunity to make change?
100%. And part of it is having a strong reason why, having a vision and goals that you want to achieve, and then having a very clear clarity about those steps that you need to take to get out. So I was talking to somebody in the NHS who's desperate to get out of their job at the weekend, and I said, look, the reason why you're feeling depressed is because you get up in the morning and there's no light at the end of the tunnel. You laid in bed thinking, is this it? Is this my life? It's shit. You know why? Because Viktor Frankl says you can bear anything as long as you've got hope, and you don't seem to have any hope. You need to create hope by creating a vision, and property is the way that you can achieve that vision. I was one of those people that thought I needed loads and loads of money until, I had some major mindset shifts, when I went on my training. And one of them was about good debt versus bad debt. I had no mortgage when I, went on my training because I'd spent 25 years paying it off. So what did I do? I immediately remortgaged my property. I didn't take it to the
And
full
everyone
sort
told
of
you you
eight.
was mad.
Absolutely, yeah, and now I play with my ex-colleagues, those that, and I don't want to sound depressing because you mentioned 65, 70. Some have already gone. I'm 66, and some of my mates have already gone. and you think, yeah, you have not enjoyed the best years of your life at all. And so basically, I immediately learned about good debt, bad debt. I learned about, and this is what I think you're alluding to as well, leveraging of time and leveraging of cash. And all of these were alien to me. It's like I was pay as you earn. I got a monthly paycheck. I looked at the bottom right hand corner. I didn't bother looking at the top left hand corner, um, and that's it. That most people think that is their life, and we actually set a target of Nicola leaving the job in 2 years, as I said, because we still had these doubts about whether it was achievable or not. And I commented about the team I was working with at the weekend, and I said, look, none of us are extraordinary. We've all achieved. We're all got big portfolios and do what we want to do. I said we're just ordinary people. All of us are ordinary people who've taken up doing all to a degree extraordinary. Well, what some people would perceive as extraordinary things, and that's not the case.
Mm.
All we've done is educate ourselves in property and decided that's the way, that's the vehicle I'm going to use. Some people use Bitcoin, some people use Forex, some people use other businesses.
Mm.
We chose to use property. Why? Because it's tangible, it's bricks and mortar. And I think once you understand, for example, that you can use, one of my claims to fame is that within 3 hours of finishing our training and going to a relative's house and going, oh my God, we've learnt this, we've learnt that, we're so excited, we really want to, this is in my like late 50s, like 56, 57. I'm not a kid, I'm still like enthusiastic about property and this, that, and the other. And they're like, oh, we've got 30 grand you can borrow if you want. And we're like,
Mm.
no, 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 we're not
It
asking for
happens
money.
just like that, doesn't it?
Yeah, we're not
Yeah.
asking for money. But they were like, no, no, we can help, and so we paid them an interest rate, which was well above the bank rate at the time, as you can
Mm.
imagine, 8, 9 years ago. And you think, shit, it works, and the more you do it. And I do want to get this in because I think it's really, really important because I've been doing this 10 years now, and I've been going around the country for 10 years giving talks, different property networking events. And I was at a meeting, and I will say the place, it was in Cardiff. I was in a meeting in
Yeah.
Cardiff, and I was going to be talking about my book. And I was talking to loads of people who were very, very experienced property investors, and actually thought, I'm not sure my book's going to be pitched at the right level. These are all very experienced people, already probably good out at negotiating and things. And for some unknown reason, at the beginning of my talk, I said to 50 odd people in the room, who here has done a purchase lease option? And it blew my mind. There was not one hand went up. Not one hand went up.
Yeah.
And I said, right, listen up, listen up. You are missing a trick here. You are all buying deals when you don't need to buy deals.
So
Because what
powerful.
you're not doing, is actually communicating, building trust and rapport, finding out exactly what the seller, in inverted commas, wants, i.e., what's their problem, and then solving their problem, which is how I got, the PLOs that I've got
Yeah.
and things like that. And
Mate, it is such a powerful strategy. And it makes me think of the first two mentees we started working with, two brothers, based up in Birmingham, and very timid, very shy, not confident, didn't but exactly what you're talking about, didn't believe they could do it. And we drilled into them exactly what we're talking about getting out there and building relationships with local agents, being consistent, getting them being comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? Which was,
yeah,
there was a lot of that, but they
yeah,
took huge action. And within a couple of weeks, they hit gold with a local agent, and a lease option literally fell into their laps with a couple that were desperate to move away. I think they wanted to go to Ireland or something for personal reasons. They wanted it. They wanted this place gone. It was a fantastic property in their goldmine area. They had a bit of an issue with a neighbour who just put in for planning, sui generis planning for a large HMO next door. That had kind of blown up and scared them a little bit. They
right, yeah,
wanted it gone overnight. And long story short, we helped to broker a deal with the agent. We locked in a 5-year lease option so that they could wash their hands of it. They didn't need the money to move on. They had another property in Ireland. And we got it at £70,000, but genuinely below BMV, £70,000 worth of equity baked in on day one on a 5-year option. And it was in their goldmine area, ready to go SA overnight. So they could use that cash flow from the property to then, purchase the property down the road and use it for the deposit. So absolutely, it's an incredible, incredible strategy. But I will also agree with what you said, that a lot of people, they're learning about it, they're listening to it, they're excited about it, but actually doing it and making it happen is another story.
Yeah, and part of it is often when they've had the session on purchase lease options and they've had all the input and the training and what have you, they come out and they go to me, I don't understand purchase lease options. And I say, I think you do. I think the question you're asking me is, why would anybody do it? Why would
Yeah,
they give you their property? Well, I'll
yeah,
tell you now, when you're faced with a situation that a landlord or an owner is saying, please, 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 just take it off my hands. I've had my fill of it. They're an older landlord or something. That's when you realise, bloody hell, it does work. You know,
yeah.
but
Oh,
again,
there's
you've
an
got
endless list of reasons.
yeah,
And again, it comes down to education and understanding what those reasons are. So then you can communicate them confidently and eloquently, because there's no point reading a book and leaving it there and then kind of having an idea. And then you go into an agent and you pitch it and it's all over the place. You've
and
got
I
to
think
kind of
that's
have
I think you're right. So, and I'm sorry I interrupted you there, but and I think you're right. I think you don't need to pitch it, and I think the danger is they get wrapped up in
yeah,
the language of it, in just saying
yeah.
what do you want, Well, we
You
just
need
want to
to
go to
understand
Ireland,
it enough. You need to understand it enough so that when you hear the pain points, right, and
correct?
the reasons, then you can go, this could work in this specific situation.
Yeah,
And then you can casually kind of start dropping it into that conversation with the agent.
and
So
that's the bit, isn't it? That's the bit listening to
mm,
that's the effective listening that a lot of people don't
yes,
do. And the reason they don't do the
yes,
effective listening is because they're focused on what they want,
yeah,
and they're thinking, oh, what price can I get it for? How can I do this deal? How can I broker this deal? Instead of just going, do you know what? I just need to ask a lot of questions. I just need to listen and pick up on those cues. Like you say, somebody saying, do you know, I'm just sick of the hassle. Oh, right. Okay. And
yeah.
you then know I need to explore what that hassle means.
How
Or
can I help you? What is it that you want from this situation?
yeah,
Robert, this is the stuff, like, honestly, I could speak about this stuff all night. I love
mm,
it. I think it's so interesting, the psychology behind it, the power of it. If you can get this stuff down and you can understand it, and it amazes me, and this is what I bring to our mentoring program, right? I'm not the smart one. I'll happily hold my hands up and admit that. My business partner is the really smart one when it comes to spreadsheets and numbers and business, like fundamentals of business and marketing. Amazing. There's no one better. What I bring to the business is teaching people how to do exactly what it is that we're talking about today, right?
yeah,
First of all, about mindset. Then it's about, and this is what I wanted to ask you. There's a lot involved here, but the next thing that I wanted to ask you about, and I'm aware that we're already burning through time because this is such a great topic. How do you suggest that someone who is, I don't know, let's say that they're stacking shelves in Tesco's, right? I don't want to stereotype here, but I'm going to say that that person potentially might have slightly lower self-esteem than a doctor. I'm just going to say that. Maybe I'm wrong, right? But in most cases, they might feel, I'm not good enough. I haven't achieved enough. I'm stacking shelves in Tesco's, right? How do we begin to break that mindset down and rebuild that up into changing somebody's identity in their mind so that when they walk into a room of other property professionals in a networking environment, that they can stand there and confidently put themselves across as now a property investor, potentially before they've done any deals, because that's the chicken and egg situation, right? They've got to start selling themselves and talking in that way before they may have done some deals. So they've got to fix it up here. So how do we change someone's identity?
I think we use number one, we obviously they need to invest in themselves. That, and again, I don't want that sound like a cliche and just an excuse to get money off people, because I'm going to sit here and say, look, at the end of the day, it took a long time for me to decide to invest in myself, but once I did, I realised the value of it. But I'm conscious of the fact that not everybody, you know, gets it that quickly. How do they build their self-esteem? It's basically by surrounding themselves with like-minded people. B, having those case studies around them of people who have gone out and done exactly what it is that they want to achieve. And rather than looking up to them, they look into them. What is it that you did that I can do that's a similar sort of thing? And I don't think you are stereotyping. As I say, we could talk about the lady who's in the NHS. People think that property is not for them because it's for rich people, you
Yeah,
know, and people with bags of money to start with. And so we have, it's our responsibility to do case studies and support them in a way that says, actually, you've got to start somewhere. This is where to start. And I was talking, I was on a podcast a few weeks ago, and I said, look, I can think of half a dozen reasons why you would go into an estate agent, while even when you're not looking at a property, you might not have one you would go in and introduce yourself. It doesn't have to be a long, you go in, you say, look, I'm new to property, I'm looking to get involved in property. I'd like to find out what the market's like. I'd like to look at certain properties. I really don't want to waste your time, but can you help me do that? And the estate agent side, you've got to get used to rejection to a degree, but you will find somebody who wants to help you. And how do you build your esteem? It's very difficult, Alex, as you know, but you've just got to say, go out and do it,
yeah.
reflect on it, get used to having a bit of rejection. Nobody likes rejection, but the reality is once you unless you're out there, unless people know what it is that you do, then nothing's going to happen. And I go back full circle almost to what I said earlier on, that people who are new, I think you have to get across to them that they do have life skills. That person stacking shelves in Tesco, without stereotyping, has committed themselves to work. They are working. That means they want to better themselves. That means that they are, looking to improve their lives. That means that they have got the discipline to turn up on time to work. There's lots of things about, so there's lots of life skills that people take for granted
Huge.
sometimes, that basically you can actually play on and say, look, I'm keen. I'm currently working at Tesco's. Don't be something you're not. I believe in fake it until you make it, but not by lying, just by thinking, I belong here and I've got to start somewhere. And I'm
Let me
starting with
just
you.
jump in there. Yeah, that's amazing, Robert. And let me just jump in there because that's something that I am wickedly passionate about. What you said about life skills. I'm someone who dropped out of school. I didn't drop out of school. I finished school, but with literally nothing. But so I didn't fit the mold of go to college, go to university, get a job, climb the career ladder, right? So I basically left the UK and I just went off and traveled the world for 20 odd years. Turned out, doing all right, fell into jobs which came to me because of my ability to hold conversation, build relationships. And guess what? When you can do that, all of a sudden the need for bits of paper fall away because people want to employ you and work with you and deal with you because of the way that you communicate, hold conversation, make jokes, make people feel at ease, make people feel comfortable. So what you said about life skills, that person who's working in Tesco's, and this is what these people need to understand, they may well be much better placed and have much better social skills in order to catapult them to success in property through relationship building and through conversation and making people feel comfortable than someone with 15 gazillion degrees and doctorates and PhDs and all the rest of it, who can read a book from front to back in 5 minutes, consume the information, but they can't hold a conversation, right? Because they're book smart, but they're not life smart. And I almost feel that being able to have a solid conversation with a stranger and make them feel comfortable and make them laugh is worth more. There's more value in that, in my opinion, than someone who's got 15 degrees but can't look at someone in the eyes and goes bright red when someone asks them what their name is. Right. And I've seen this. I saw this. I was on a property training course and there was a guy next to me who he was actually a doctor, I think. He was a junior doctor. That's right. Educated up the yin yang, had every bit of paper you could imagine, but he was constantly looking at the ground. He was so nervous, and I ended up having to call some agents on his behalf because he was so terrified.
Mm.
So, you know, you need this stuff. What we're talking about, you cannot succeed in this business or any business. If it's business, maybe you can in a job, but in a business, you've got to have people skills. So that person in Tesco's has just as much capability of making it big or achieving the life of their dreams or getting out their job in less than 2 years, maybe 8 months, like you did, if they can have conversation.
100%. I agree with you. I mean, when I left the police and I did clinical hypnotherapy, then I went for I actually went for a job as an assessor and training senior police officers and coaching senior police officers. And there was only two of us went for the interview. And one was an occupational psychologist, and there was me. And I got the job. And afterwards, they said, on paper, we weren't even going to bother interviewing you. You know, they said, we looked at your CV, we looked at your background, we weren't even going to interview you, but there was only two of you, so we interviewed you. The other candidate completely blew you away on paper, and then we interviewed you, and you completely blew them away because
Yeah.
they just didn't, they couldn't answer, you know. And it was, and the questions are just like, what would you do here, what would you do, how have you dealt with this, how, you
Yeah.
know. And you know, if you, even if you're in, like we said, we don't want to stereotype, but even if you're in a run-of-the-mill job, you're still dealing potentially with conflict. If you're dealing with members of the public, you're having to communicate, you're dealing with conflict, you're dealing with um, issues that require that skill set of communication. I must confess, though, I am that awful person that you sit next to on the train or the plane for a 12-hour flight, thinking, "Oh, I'm going to get my head down," and then you sit next to me, and that just doesn't happen.
Oh
You know,
God,
and
you're not that person, are you?
I am. I'm one of but
You're
I'm good.
that guy who I have to make it. I have to go sit in the toilet for 20 minutes just to get a rest.
Yeah. No, I like to think that I'm pretty good at reading non-verbal communication. So if I'm boring somebody, I
Yeah.
like to think I can pick up on it. But no, but you know, the world's a small place actually, and the more you start chatting to people, and you alluded to it earlier on about common ground. So I would like to sort of give people a tip here about, you know, how do you start an initial conversation, and how do you build rapport fairly quickly? And I just call it the three C's. You said about common ground. Well, the first C before that is just be curious. Be very interested in other people. You said it about estate agents. Just don't go in there and say, I'm interested in. It's like, how are you? How's business? What's going on? You know,
Hmm.
they are human beings, believe it or not, estate agents. You know, and so just
You sure?
treat them. You treat them like they're having a chat. You know, I'm not one of those that subscribes to, you know, taking chocolate eclairs in and doing that, because to me that isn't natural and authentic, you know. So for
Yeah.
me it's like, so
I
go
I
so
agree. I
so
agree.
three C's really to build rapport very quickly. Be curious about that person, effectively listening to what they say, responding to that, and find common ground. So even when I'm going into a vendor's house or something like that, I haven't got children, but I might see somebody's, you know, on their dressing table or their sideboard, there'll be pictures of the children with the gowns on from university. And I go, oh, what university did they go to? What did they study? I'll guarantee I can then make a
Yeah.
conversation around that. So find common ground, and that makes the connection. Three C's: curious, common ground, make a connection.
And something else with agents, Robert, and I'm amazed how many people don't do this. They sit in their, and again, it all comes back to being confident and having the abilities to hold conversation. And the way that most people avoid having to put themselves in that uncomfortable situation is they spend months at home on the phone in their nice little comfortable warm office with a cup of tea, hitting the phones day after day after day. Don't get me wrong, you've got to do that, but you need to be mixing it in with physically putting on your shoes and going down and putting yourself in front of the agent, shaking the hands, looking at them in the eyes, having the conversations that we're talking about and building rapport. And I highlighted this, and I think we used the picture with our mentees to kind of evidence it. I had a good conversation on the phone with an agent. She understood what we did. There was obviously good rapport there. So immediately I said, is it okay if I make an appointment to come down and see you, have a cup of coffee, build on that foundation, right? Did that, had a half an hour, 45-minute sit down, spent some time talking about, like we said, anything but property, slowly merged into that, what we do, how we can help them. And we ended up walking out, and I've got a picture on my Facebook. There was like 5 or 6 leads, brochures. This person's motivated. That person, would accept a lower offer. An option could work on this. An EDC could work on that. And, that was just from one example of going in there and putting myself physically in. Because immediately you take yourself from the masses of people where you're just another person on the phone
Yeah,
pitching the same thing,
yeah.
to a much smaller pool of people where they've seen you, they've felt the handshake, they've seen the eyes, right? You've made the jokes. So people have got to do that if you're serious. You've got to get out there and you've got to be talking to agents in person.
I agree 100%. I mean, two things I would say on that is, and as I think you've probably read in my book, I say, people won't buy from you until they buy into you. So they've got to buy into you,
Yeah,
and by buy from you, I mean work with you, either invest in you, lend you money, or sell you deals or bring deals to you. So they won't buy from you until they buy into you. And for me as well, I
yeah,
chose smaller, independent estate agents
yeah.
where the decision
It's
maker
a huge tip.
would get the money. Because if you deal with
Yeah,
national branches, at the end of the day, they've got their KPIs. They might not want to spend as long with
yeah,
you, etc. So, and certainly within a week of nurturing one estate agent, he rang me up. He said, "Hi, Robert. I've got. I'm not even measured it up yet. I've got an unlicensed HMO. I don't really want to put it on the market. Are you interested?" I said, "Absolutely." He said, "All right. Well, I'm going down now. Do you want to meet me there?" So I met him there. I was in that fortunate position that I could drive for 30 minutes and meet him there. So I met him there. Whilst I was there, the managing agent was there, and I said, "Have you got the details of the seller?" And he said, "Yeah, of course I have." I said, "Can I have them?" He said, "Yeah, of course you can." So I got the details of the seller and then spoke to the agent. I said, "Look, if I come to some agreement with the owner, is it okay? How much would you want as a fee?" And he said, "Oh, just give us £1,000."
yeah,
And I went, "That's absolutely perfect." And that was it. That was left to me then, just to
yeah.
negotiate with the seller. That became an exchange contract delayed completion. Um, and that all stemmed
Awesome.
from only within a week of nurturing that estate agent to say, "This is what I'm looking for. This is who I am." And I deliver, and I do, because part of it is like, you know, coming across as that credible person who's going to do what they say, which you do, and
Mm,
I do. Um, and if I can't do it, then I'll tell you it's not for me. I'll not. But and
mm.
again, and I think this is important. You think, but I might be able to find somebody else who does can help you. So you become a bit of a
Yeah,
connector as well. I think, you know,
yeah. That in itself, Robert, you can make a damn good living. I know people, right, who have built a career on this stuff,
mm,
and they are now professional connectors. That's what they do. They hold events, they bring people together, whether it's high net worth individuals, property specific people, just getting everybody into a room together based on them building independent relationships with people and then bring them people together. And it keeps coming back to the same thing. If you can nail this, how to communicate with people, it's at the absolute root of everything we do in this world, whether
yeah,
it's work, whether it's family, whether it's relationships. It's everything, and it's so powerful. And I would advise anyone who's serious in getting ahead or changing the direction of their life or improving their life or achieving their vision or achieving their dreams to put communication at the absolute top, along with health, mental health, physical health, which I think is as equally as important. But if you can get those foundations, everything else you build on, it's just gonna blow up.
Yeah,
Robert,
and
we're time's
all right.
just absolutely flying here,
We
and
need
and
to make
I,
it a
like I said,
series,
I'd
don't
love to
we?
talk about this.
Can't we do a series of
We
podcasts?
need to make this a series. I love this subject. I'm passionate about it, and I hope that people are going to reach out to you off the back of this, and I hope we've made it clear how important it is, especially in property, right? To really kind of drill this home. But I want you to give you some time to talk a little bit about your book and
Mhm.
what you've got going on. Because I know you've got the book, you're doing your mentoring, you're doing your coaching, you're doing your speeches, your talk. So just a couple of minutes. Tell us a little bit about you and kind of how you can help people grow.
I mean, the book really is about my model, which is quite simple, really, but it is hard to apply in some respects. But perfecting conversations, PER is the acronym. It's like, so before you even have the conversation that you want to have, you plan, prepare, and potentially practice. You role play. Um, then there's engage, explore, and evolve. So understanding questioning techniques, building rapport and understanding questioning techniques, and then evolve, which is what we were alluding to earlier. You might be going thinking, I'm going to buy this property. By the time you finish the conversation, it's evolved into potentially a PLO, an assisted sale, vendor finance, that sort of thing. So you do need to know the strategies and then resolve, reflect, and refine. And I think where I'm really, really good at, and what my strength is helping people reflect on their conversations. Okay, what did you say? How did you say it? How might you do that differently? You explained the PLO, but how might you do it differently? So that it's easier to understand. So yeah, that my mentoring. I'm more. I'll keep it brief and just say if anybody wants us to reach out to me, I offer 3 20-minute chats to see if I can help them. I'm not one of those people who's out to make money per se. If I can't help somebody but point them in the right direction, I will. And if I can help them, then obviously we have a conversation about going further with that. Uh, but yeah, I suppose the first thing to do is to think about reaching out and buying my book on Amazon. And everybody says, well, how do I find it and this, that, and the other? It's like, well, just Google Rob McPhun. It's really, really easy. There aren't many of us around. It's just such a strange name. So if you Google Rob McPhun and put Amazon, then Perfecting Property Conversations as a book comes up. It's a good starter for 10, really. And then if people read it or go into it and think, actually, I'd like to know a lot more, then yeah, I'm more than happy to have a chat with them. So
Yeah, I would implore anyone, like I said, who's looking to get ahead, who's looking to start their journey, to make that. Everybody's, especially in property, it seems like everybody's got their must their go-to books,
mm,
and everybody's Rich Dad Poor Dad, and all these different, was it the principles of how to win friends and influence people or whatever it is.
yeah.
And they're great. Don't get me wrong, they're good books, but personally, I would put yours, near the top, because I just think it's everything. You can learn about cash flow and assets and liabilities, and how to spend money or whatever, but none of it really matters if you
Mm.
can't hold conversation. It's really is, I
Yeah, those
can't
conversations are
emphasize that enough.
it,
So I would, yeah,
that's what converts the leads. You've got to get the leads, and then you've got to convert them.
exactly.
And if
You
you're
got to
not
get the leads
converting them,
first.
yeah, and yeah, at the end of the day, it all starts with the ability to communicate, and communicate at the same
Yeah,
level as the person that you're talking to. And certainly, somebody read.
yeah,
I know we've got to finish very quickly, but somebody read my book, and about a week later, he rang me up and he said, I've been in printing for 20 years. I bought your book about property. He says, I've been in printing for 20 years. He said, I was meeting two very important clients this week. I read your book about planning and preparing for the conversation. He said, and just a tip about what are they likely to ask me? What if I was sat where they are, what questions would I ask? He says, and I just came up with the answers to those. I went into both meetings 10 times confident than I would have done. He said, and I've
Mm.
won the two biggest contracts I've ever won in 20 years. He says, and I thought your book was about
Amazing.
property. He said, and it's not. It's about
If
conversation.
that's not worth the if that's not worth the whatever it costs, you
Yeah,
know,
about
a
seven
few
ninety
quid,
nine,
then
I
I
think
don't
it
know
is.
what
Yeah,
is. But
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
well worth it. Awesome, awesome. Yeah, guys, go out and buy Robert's book. It'll change your life. Robert, just lastly, I'm genuinely disappointed that we got to wrap this up, but nobody wants to listen to a 3-hour podcast. But there's so much more that I wanted to talk about that I work with my mentees on, simple things that you can do that just change everything. But maybe we'll do another one. We'll do an in studio one when I'm back from Spain. But is it okay if I ask you to be a little bit vulnerable for a minute? Because I also think it was something else I wanted to talk about, that I think that the world now is actually warming and turning more towards people who can show vulnerability. I think they can resonate more with people who can say, I'm going through a hard time, rather than people that are stepping down off they're coming down the steps of their rented private jet, right, that they lease for the day to do some filming or whatever.
Yeah.
So I think it's really powerful, and I think it helps people to build community when they're vulnerable. Also, I'm a big advocate for mental health. I've had my struggles. Most people have had their struggles, whether they're honest about it or not. I'm honest about it. I've huge anxieties, gone through my periods of depression after relationship breakdowns and different bits and pieces. So I like to ask all of our guests, if you're comfortable with it, because I think mental health is so important, and I think that it helps people to hear from other people who are seemingly doing really well, super successful, exactly where they want to be, holiday homes in South Africa, making all this money from property. So really, it's just a very simple question: is, are you happy with where you are today and how you feel in this very minute? Are you happy with where you and Nicola are, mentally, in your head?
I think I'm happier than I've ever been. That's not to say that things are perfect, because I don't think things are ever perfect. I have my, I'm 66. How do I wind down? I feel, and this is going to sound absolutely perverse, but I think that's the problem with mental health sometimes, is people look at you and go, well, surely you can't have these problems. You've got money, you've got
Mm,
this, that, and the other. And I say, well, yeah, but that's not how I feel. And so I feel at times, this is going to blow your mind. I actually feel financially insecure at times, um, because I'm not sure how much I need, and things like that. So yeah, quick answer: I am happier than I've ever been in my life, because we have this lifestyle. But am I a work in progress? I think we're all a work in progress, because life throws you curveballs as well. And my friend texted me saying, they found some stuff, and basically I'm going through tests, and immediately that makes you feel incredibly vulnerable as well. Um,
yeah.
and stuff like that does throw you. You don't want to lose people, um, and it just because it highlights your own vulnerability as well. So I'm not sure whether that's the answer suits your
Yeah, no,
purposes,
it,
but
no,
but
yeah, absolutely. It is a great answer, and I think it's just important to talk about, because of this comparison syndrome now with social media and everybody thinking that, everyone else out there is setting the world on fire and they're kind of stuck in their life, and I just like to kind of, because everybody that comes on here, they're on their way, partly or fully, and it's easy to pedestalize people, but we've all started somewhere, we've all battled, we've all pushed and grinded, for a long time,
and I think you
it doesn't
alluded
happen
to it.
overnight.
Look, if you're going to get out your comfort zone, that means you're going to feel uncomfortable. And so,
Yeah.
I was sat on a stage with about 800 people watching me, and this, the person who trained me was interviewing me. And I said, "Do you know what? I've learned things about myself over the last 2 or 3 years that I've not liked what I found.
Yeah.
And I said, I thought I could handle stress really, really well. I said, ironically, give me somebody with a knife or a shotgun and I've got to talk to them and talk them down. I feel quite comfortable with that." Ironically, I said, but
Mm.
dealing with a planning officer that I'm not in control, or I don't feel in control, actually stresses me out, or it did stress me out quite a lot. And we did, and again, I don't want to put people off property, but we did reach a point where when the letterbox went, I didn't want to look what the letters were, you know. Um, but you work through that, and there's a phrase that I use. The phrase that my coach used on me when I was feeling low, and you might like it. It might resonate with your listeners. He said, "Rob, your nose is in the manure. If you get your nose out of the manure and you just look up, you'll see a nice little rose bush, and that rose bush is flowering. That's what you're aiming for. But at the moment, it feels like your head is in the manure. We just need to lift your head out of the manure." And he was absolutely right, and that was 10 years ago. That resonates with me every time when I think, yeah, get your head out of the manure, Rob. It's not that
That
simple,
sounds to
but
me immediately like a very, very nice place to wrap the podcast up on, to just
yeah,
get your nose out the manure and look up, and you'll see a nice little rose bush. That's
yeah,
pretty awesome.
yeah.
So look, Rob, yeah, we're already kind of there. We've got to do a part 2. I think this stuff's so powerful, and I think there's so much value in this for our audience, to help them in whatever business they're in. So
Yeah.
I'd love to have you back. I'd love to do an in-person one, and kind of, just
No,
get into this
yeah.
stuff in a
Look,
deeper way.
if you
So
invite me over
we'll
to
get it.
Mallorca, mate, then there's
well,
worse
well,
places to be.
the studio's in Peterborough,
Oh,
so we'll
bugger.
do it in the summer and try and make it a little bit nicer for you. But
Yeah,
look, Rob,
I
thanks
mean, yeah,
so much for coming on the podcast. We're going to put all your information in the show notes, and I would implore anybody to get in touch with Rob and learn how to communicate. It is so friggin' important. And thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed that episode on the Airbnb Nomads podcast. And until next time, yeah, don't forget to listen. Listen more than you talk. You got 2 ears and 1 mouth, right? So use them. Cheers, Rob. We'll speak
take
soon.
care. Take care. Cheers.
Thanks so much.